We live in a world where the arts are needed kind of more than ever in so many ways. Very few things really encourage creativity and thinking and openness and willingness to try new things like the arts. And for us specifically, music. So being a piano teacher right now, first of all, there's never been a more lucrative time for piano teachers if you know how to market yourself or you happen to be in the right area. I see many independent studio teachers making more than just a living, but actually doing quite well for themselves. So in that sense, if you have the business savvy for it, it's a great time to be a piano teacher.
Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Hello there, piano teachers. We are talking about a hot topic today, and that is AI and ChatGPT. If you have felt fear around AI or had questions about the ethics of it, my guest today is going to get into all of that, along with talking about how we can use it in our studios to support what we are doing with our students. The reality is that unless you are only teaching students who are around age 60 and up, your students are using AI. And so it's important for you to educate yourself about it. And who knows, maybe it can even make your life more streamlined. We have a lot to get into today, but first, here's a little bit about my guests. Omar Roy currently serves as Assistant Professor of Piano and Piano Pedagogy and Coordinator of Group Piano in the School of Music at the University of South Carolina. A strong supporter of independent music teachers, Dr. Roy is in demand as a clinician. He frequently presents workshops and guest lectures to music teacher organizations and universities, and is a regular adjudicator for festivals and competitions. His involvement with music teacher organizations has led to leadership positions and presentations at the state and national level, including the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy. Dr. Roy is also part of the administrative team for the Art of Piano Pedagogy, a growing Facebook group that acts as a resource and forum of discussion that reaches nearly 23,000 teachers located throughout the world, and its companion site, Sustain. Here's my interview with Omar. Hi, Omar. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here with us today to talk about AI and ChatGPT and all these things. I've been having such a hard time saying ChatGPT lately. Hopefully I can get it out. But before we start, could you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do?
My name is Omar Roy. I'm a piano professor at the University of South Carolina in piano and piano pedagogy. So I teach both applied piano and also piano pedagogy coursework at the undergraduate and graduate level. I also supervise our group piano program, where we train music educators in, kind of the helpful ways that they can incorporate piano into their jobs. And so I have kind of a hybrid role within the School of Music in the sense that I maintain both a performance profile while also publishing and presenting in pedagogy journals and conferences, as well as other kind of relevant venues. And I try to still stay pretty involved the local and state roles. And I've had some leadership roles in the South Carolina Music Teachers Association, and also during my time at University of Alabama, I was also in some leadership roles in ALMTA.
So there's like 1,000 things we could have chosen to talk about in piano pedagogy and all of that. But I recently heard you at the NCKP conference talking about AI, and it was such a great presentation that I thought I need him to come on my podcast when we do this AI topic. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Tell me just a little bit about your background with AI and technology and why it even interests you.
Well, so I've always been kind of a tech nerd. I've always enjoyed playing with, kind of the latest and greatest technologies. And of course, when ChatGPT was starting to become popular over the last several years, I thought, well, I better start playing around with it and see what I can figure out with it. And so, for me, it was really just kind of a curiosity. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized Well, we've actually been engaging with, generative artificial intelligence or some form of AI for a very long time. And that, for me, kind of relieved a lot of some of the stigma around its use and kind of guided how I was going to engage with it as I started to figure out, how is this useful for me? And how could it potentially be useful for other people? What is it good at? What is it not good at? And so for me, ChatGPT has largely been kind of experimental. In the last year, our university put together the inaugural class of AI teaching fellows, and now they're in their second class of teaching fellows. But kind of what we were tasked with was coming together as faculty. So faculty were selected from several different areas across campus. So we had people from the School of Business, people from other STEM fields, people from the humanities, and also myself. And we kind of put together a lot of material and strategies on the best practices in the use of artificial intelligence, with kind of a focus on how to incorporate it ethically in academia, but also some general best practices kinds of things that might be helpful to the average person trying to engage with AI.
Great. So we're going to get into all of that because that sounds fascinating and definitely relevant. I was kind of curious when you said that we've been engaging with I don't remember what you call them, chatbots or whatever, for a long time. What are you referring to? Because I think a lot of us don't think that we have or don't realize that we have been.
Well, as you know, in 1997, Skynet became self-aware and, launched an attack on humanity. But that is a work of fiction from the movie Terminator. We've been engaging with AI for a very long time. So, for example, if you're sending somebody a text message and you see that predictive text thing pop up, that's a form of AI. That's actually a form of a large language model in many ways, because it's examining patterns in language and trying to predict what you're going to say next and giving you viable options for doing that. We can go way back to the early 2000s or even the late 90s. If you've ever used Microsoft Word, you might remember that little character on the bottom corner of the screen, Clippy. Clippy would provide suggestions on writing. He would detect errors in grammar and also syntax and provide ways for you to be a little bit more efficient. That's a form of artificial intelligence. Anytime that you're on Netflix, right, and you're using the kind of suggested movies or shows feature, those are artificial intelligence algorithms that are kind of predicting what you might be interested in and trying to give you suggestions that would be acceptable for you. So we actually engage with artificial intelligence on a daily basis, and we have been for the better part of the last 20 years or so. And even in the music realm, if you've ever used any sort of music teaching app that includes pitch detection and error detection and rhythmic detection, those are all AI algorithms that are used to help you educate students. So pretty much everybody that has used technology in some way over the last 20 years or so has encountered AI at some point, if not almost on a daily basis.
Yeah. So give us a little bit of background on ChatGPT and why are people freaking out about that one in particular?
ChatGPT was created by OpenAI. And what GPT stands for is Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And the way it works is that it's a large language model that can be used to generate text, answer questions, can assist with problem solving in natural conversational language. So you can have a conversation with ChatGPT, and if it's trained to a specific extent, you might not even know that you're talking to an AI chatbot, right? What people are really concerned with, at least in academia, is the ethics of using ChatGPT. Are people actually doing their own work? Are they using it to fabricate essays or analyses or data and so on and so forth? But as we've become more and more familiar with, what generative AI entails, there's also an environmental aspect that's happening. Each interaction with ChatGPT, depending on what you're asking it to do, can consume a small amount of water or an enormous amount of water. The power requirements for running the servers that power ChatGPT and other generative AI models are enormous. So now there's also this environmental ethics component to the use of generative AI, among many others. There are many industries in which ChatGPT and other similar services are actually pushing people out of jobs. For example, software engineering is, you can ask ChatGPT to code just about anything for you. And this has been extremely helpful to people with no background in computer science, but certainly can be problematic for the industry at large. So there are a number of different kind of ethical and practical issues that are cropping up as generative AI starts to become more of a mainstream phenomenon.
Yeah. Can I ask your take on some of those things? What do you, Omar, think about the environmental impact and taking away jobs? I don't think it's going away. So what do we do with this information?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I'm an avid outdoorsman. And so I love the environment very, very deeply. And I care about the environment a lot. So, I've become quite a bit more conscientious about my use of ChatGPT and how often and to what extent I engage with it, because I am very aware of what goes into each interaction with it. And, I can't advise anybody on what they should or shouldn't do. For example, it may feel like you don't even have a choice at this point, but to interact with it. There are options. For example, when you conduct a Google search now, you get this kind of like prepackaged little AI blurb at the top of your search results that kind of summarize things for you. And you can turn that off, but that's kind of the default now. So in many ways, we are kind of being forced to use it, even if we don't want to. So I would urge people to be very conscientious about, making sure that they're aware of the situations in which AI is being used and kind of making themselves aware on how they can choose to opt out, if that's possible. To the extent that AI is in some disciplines, causing a shift in the way that we kind of perceive employment, and in some cases just straight up cutting jobs. That's a really complex philosophical issue because, we like to think that advancements in technology are principally for the betterment of society and providing people with more leisure time. But unfortunately, with the way that the world works, ultimately it benefits corporations more than it benefits people, right? I don't know that I have a really clear-cut answer on that, other than that it's really complex and a really fraught issue. We start to see new types of jobs pop up, like prompt engineers. So people who spend their entire kind of like educational training on learning how to engage with and improve the function of generative AI. But we kind of have yet to see how that's going to play out in the long term. Because as we know, generative AI is continuously learning, right? The engineers that design it are consistently feeding it new information, so it continues to learn and become more nuanced and more complex. So we don't even know if prompt engineer will continue to be a relevant role in society if it becomes sophisticated enough to kind of work on its own. So it's a very complex issue. People that are way smarter than I am are thinking and talking about this. And I am kind of interested and eager to see how things develop over the next, 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And even over the next 50 years, we probably won't really know the impact for decades, perhaps. I don't know.
It might be unrecognizable.
Yeah. Well, we went really deep, really fast. So we're going to lighten it up a little bit here. I would love for you to tell us some of the ways that piano teachers in particular are using AI that you've seen maybe at the university level, or maybe how your students are using it, and how piano teachers who are listening to this podcast might consider using it in an ethical way?
Yeah, so the truth is not a lot of piano teachers are really using it. And if they are, nobody's being very public about it. I do have some suggestions for people. So for example, and I think I talked about this in my talk at NCKP, piano teachers and private music teachers in general are kind of unique in the sense that they're both experts in their field, but then they also have to be very entrepreneurial. You guys, essentially. And I remember when I had my own private studio, I was, customer service. I was also, management. I was the social media manager. All of these different roles that we take on as independent studio teachers. I'm kind of more far removed from that now, since I work in academia. So I do want to be clear about that. But, there are some things that, everybody just kind of dreads doing. For example, drafting emails, putting together studio policies, any sort of like administrative work. ChatGPT can often help with that. For example, if you happen to have a social media account associated with your studio, you can ask ChatGPT to draft 150 or some other arbitrary number of tweets for you that you can put out, and you can ask it to explore a couple of different topics. You can have it write a beginning of the year email for you where you just input your calendar of events, and it will draft a very nice kind of marketing email that will inform families in your studio of all the events that you have coming up throughout the year. It can really save you a lot of time in that way. I think the most significant administrative use of ChatGPT is that it can schedule for you. It becomes really, really challenging to schedule large numbers of students. And if you don't already have some sort of studio management software, like My Music Studio or something like that, you can input a bunch of different schedules into it and introduce parameters around what days you're available. And it will, in many cases, pop out a fairly accurate schedule. Now, sometimes you do run into errors and you have to revise your prompt or ask it to fix it. But generally speaking, if it's something that's possible, it will create an accurate schedule. Where you tend to run into issues is if you ask it to do something that's impossible, right? You have 8 one-hour lessons that you want to fit into Monday from 1 to 3 p.m., right? It's going to try and make something work for you, right? It's going to try and fabricate something for you. So it does have to work with what's possible, right? Otherwise, it'll try to do something that it's not supposed to do, and you'll get errors. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Those are good ideas. And I did see a couple of my friends posting this year for the first time that they had used ChatGPT to help with their schedule at the beginning of the fall. So I think some teachers are starting to figure some of this out. Can you talk a little bit about prompting ChatGPT and how to prompt? Is there a better way to prompt and a not so good way to prompt it?
Yeah, actually, I have kind of this set of principles for good prompting, right? The first one is specificity. You really want to be as specific as possible with the task that you're asking of ChatGPT or any other generative AI. It just depends on what you have access to. So, really introducing as many parameters in as much detail as possible. You want to give it as much information as possible, and you want to present that information as cleanly as possible. So, for example, if I'm working with a bunch of schedules, rather than kind of typing in this sort of nearly incoherent fashion, like this list of days and times that people are available, and it can process that, but you're more likely to run into errors. You can input all of that into a spreadsheet, and ChatGPT is very good at kind of delineating what data belongs where in a spreadsheet, and makes it very easy for it to work with. Rewording your prompt, trying multiple versions of the same general idea and seeing what different answers you get. Sometimes one way of wording a specific prompt will just generate better results than another. But my favorite principle is to revise the answers that ChatGPT is giving me. So, for example, if I ask it to do something and it doesn't pump out exactly what I want, I might ask it to focus more on a particular aspect of the prompt, or I'll start to refine the answer through successive prompts based on what it's giving me, and ultimately, arrive at something that is more close to what I'm looking for. I will note that very rarely, when I'm working with ChatGPT on creative things or lesson planning things, almost never does it give me exactly what I want, nor should it, right? The point is that it gives me a good starting off point. It organizes my thoughts in a way that is easier to digest. And then from there, I have something that's really easy to work with. So, it takes out a lot of or doesn't take out, but makes a lot of the initial grunt work of certain tasks a lot easier, and gives me something that I can spend more time refining, which is really what I want to spend my time doing, rather than just getting the kind of nuts and bolts down.
Yeah, I've kind of started thinking of it as there's the beginning, the middle, and the end, and I'm the beginning and the end, and ChatGPT can do some of the middle. So I can just kind of word vomit whatever I want to say into ChatGPT. It'll clean it up and make it look pretty good. And then I need to go and be the end eyes on it and, revise it. And maybe there's a few back and forths in the middle there with ChatGPT, but I ultimately need to go back and be the end person, not just take that middle that it gives me and assume that it's done.
It's really good at kind of helping you refine ideas, and you can kind of find yourself in these situations where you're having a conversation with it in many ways. Well, I'd like you to focus more on this. And then it starts asking you, well, would you like me to draft a template for you that will more clearly communicate that? Why, yes, thank you. I'd love for you to do that. And so it creates this template. And so you start to find, okay, well, can you add this to the template and modify this to be a little bit different and to more accurately emphasize this? And it goes, sure. Do you want me to create an accompanying kind of handout or PowerPoint to go with that? Well, yes, actually, I would like that. And so you end up being given sometimes too much stuff to work with. And of course, what it pops out is sometimes kind of inchoate, right? It's not totally complete, not totally refined, but it gives you a lot to work with in the sense that, it'll do things that you never really thought about doing or didn't have the background to even come to that conclusion, which I find really interesting. I often kind of talk about ChatGPT as, or any generative AI as being kind of akin to the dawn of the internet, right? People were super resistant to the internet in the early days, at least from what I remember. I was rather young, but now we think of the internet as the world's biggest and most complete library, right? And the thought of not using it is kind of silly almost, right? But if the internet is the world's biggest library, you can almost think of ChatGPT as the world's most efficient librarian that can not only find the book you're looking for, it can also find books you may not have been looking for but didn't realize you needed. And it can also summarize in a very kind of crude way what those books might be about and help you compare those books and provide suggestions on further reading, because it has access to the huge database of the internet itself. For example, I have a pretty decent research background from my doctoral training, but there are simply things that I don't know exist, especially, things that are coming out recently or have come out in the last, 5 to 10 years. Certain textbooks and things like that I wouldn't think to incorporate into a course that I'm teaching. And if I ask for ChatGPT to, if I already have a reading that I've typically assigned, I might ask ChatGPT to find alternative readings from other relevant texts, and it'll pop things out that I didn't even know existed. And of course, it's then the onus is on me to really go and verify, right? To make sure that that thing actually exists, because it does hallucinate from time to time. It's gotten a little bit better about it over the vast updates and iterations of it. But very often it'll pop out something that I didn't even know existed and is an even better solution to the problem than what I was originally proposing. So its uses are really, really vast. Not just from the piano teacher's perspective or the coding perspective, but even just from a broad research lens, it can be really, really helpful pedagogically and in terms of research.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So, Omar, I'm still using the free version of ChatGPT. Do you think that it's necessary for people to upgrade to the paid version, or does the free version get you what you need? I don't really know what the difference is because I'm just using the free one.
Yeah, so the free version, you do get like a certain number of prompts per use period where you get access to the more sophisticated model. And I think for most people, that's probably adequate. If you have a lot of research-oriented things that you're doing where you need it to have full access to the internet, or you're asking it to do really complex tasks, it could be worth it for a person in that situation to spring for the paid version. But for most ordinary tasks, the free version is going to be more than sufficient for most people. I do pay out of my own pocket for the paid version, and I've found it to be very useful for me. And what I would suggest to people is to look at the differences in what services are offered in the paid version and maybe try it out for a single month and see if you get better functionality out of it compared to the free version before you make a decision to kind of keep shelling out for it.
Yeah. ChatGPT and I had a big fight one time because I was trying to get it to generate, it was something a little more complex, like a PDF or a image or something. And it kept asking me follow-up questions until I ran out of my data or whatever. And I was so mad. I was like, stop asking me clarifying questions. Just make the thing,
Yeah. That might be part of all part of a ploy to get you to pay for it.
Exactly. Like it wouldn't make the complex thing until it asked me so many questions that then it was like, sorry, you ran out of prompts for the day. You're done.
Yeah, think of all the bottles of water ChatGPT would have saved it if it had just made the thing for you.
I know, right? Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about how you're teaching your students to use ChatGPT ethically and what maybe we as piano teachers need to be teaching our students as well about how to use this ethically. How do we know if our students are using it ethically, or if they're, I know that classroom teachers are for sure dealing with this, but I think it's something we need to think about as well.
Yeah, that's really challenging because at large, we don't really have specific kind of universally accepted parameters around what constitutes ethical or unethical use. Right now, what we have is a lot of opinions on what constitutes ethical and unethical use. Even within my school, you might have one faculty member that says this particular use is okay and valid, and then another faculty member might say, no, that use is absolutely unethical and invalid and is a serious issue of academic integrity. It is actually really challenging to think about what is ethical use of generative AI in general. And so I've come to some conclusions of my own based on my time with the AI teaching fellows. We kind of agreed on a lot of things, but then I'm also on a new committee within my department to establish some standards for AI use within our school. And then we have other faculty that are on university-wide committees that are trying to set standards that apply to everybody within the university. And I'm sure part of that is communicating with other universities to see what they're doing. Generally speaking, the big no-nos are do not use generative AI to generate and submit work as though it is your own, right? That is tantamount to plagiarism, because you're only involved in the prompt. You're not actually involved in any of the intellectual work. You're not involved in any of the actual writing. You're basically just, asking a computer to do the work for you and then turning that work in as though it is your own when it's not. You definitely don't want to hide its use, since it is a generative resource, right? You do have to cite its use and be very clear about when you used it, how you used it, where you used it, and what you asked it to do. And then you also don't want to trust that it's accurate. That comes back to this idea of verifying that what it's doing is accurate, because I have seen false citations being made by ChatGPT, where you have to remember that it is a predictive in addition to a generative language model. So it will kind of take certain practices. For example, a few years ago, I asked ChatGPT to generate a 60-minute solo piano recital program consisting only of works by Filipino composers. And, it created this great list. And so I decided to, go looking for those scores. And I found that some of those scores just did not exist. Those works just didn't exist. For example, it said that there was a piano sonata opus 1 by Lucretia Casalag. Now, Casalag is a real composer, and she did write some piano sonatas, but there is no opus 1 piano sonata by her. But it would make sense that there would be, right? Opus numbers are a very common way to catalog works, and sonatas are frequently given an opus number because they are large works. And so it uses that predictive element, right? That pattern recognition to say, oh, well, this doesn't exist, but it should. So that's what I'm going to say. That's what I'm going to pop out to the person asking. So you do need to verify that it is accurate in what it puts out, and rather than just trust that it is being accurate. Even if you ask it to summarize an article for you, it's worth it to go back and read the article, because sometimes it takes away points that you wouldn't really characterize it as important, or it'll fabricate points from that article that they're not actually trying to make. It'll read the counter argument section of an article and then think that that's the meat and potatoes of an article, when in fact it's only a small part of it. So those are kind of the don'ts. You don't want to use it to generate and submit work as though it's your own. You don't want to trust that it's accurate all the time, and you don't want to hide its use. Now, from an ethical perspective, like, what do you want to do? Well, it can help you brainstorm ideas. You can think of it as a research assistant, right? It's combing the web for you, looking at things that you might not have engaged with otherwise, or might not have found, in addition to your own kind of research, right? It can help you narrow your scope or refine your question. It can help you find sources. It can help you gather and format references. It can help you summarize things for personal use. You can have it analyze data and find patterns for you. It can help you outline or generate feedback for you, which is really interesting from a writing perspective. But the kind of common theme about all of these things is that you're not submitting these things as your own work, and these are things that you normally wouldn't have to cite, because, an editor might also help you do these things. So, it is kind of a blurry line between ethical and unethical use in the academic sphere. And then certainly in the artistic sphere, the creative sphere, what generative AI is putting out is based on the repository of information that they're feeding it. And so I know that there's been some recent legislation about whether or not people can monetize videos that use AI-generated music, because, AI-generated music is based on the, model learning from music that's been submitted to it. Some of it is copywritten. So, it becomes very difficult to justify the monetization of AI-generated videos or videos that use AI-generated music. So, trying to generate profit from the use of AI is also a very kind of sticky ethical playground to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I listened to a podcast last week about the negative effects of AI on the brain. Is that something that you're concerned about at all? That we're just going to, it's like the quick and easy answer, and we aren't using our creative brains to their fullest capacity anymore?
Yeah, it's certainly something that I'm concerned about. I don't. I think AI is probably accelerating some of what's already been happening, though. I don't know that generative AI is like solely responsible. I mean, it's a good target right now because it is a kind of a hot topic of discussion. But I think by and large, the degenerative effects on the brain can be attributed not just to AI, but a lot of technology use in general, and de-emphasizing kind of like analog approaches to things. For example, if you look at the kind of content that is consumed by people on social media, even just articles that people read, the most common way to absorb articles is through listicles, as they were called a while back. I don't know if they still refer to them that way, but just these bulleted lists of that have kind of replaced journalism. But then if you look at social media, the videos that people watch on TikTok, they're often very, very short. So attention span is degenerating among individuals generationally. And there's a lot of research that kind of shows that that's true. When I am grading papers, for example, and I am witnessing the decline of writing ability, people aren't writing as well. Part of that is because of ChatGPT writing things for them, but another part of it is that people just aren't reading as much as they used to and aren't being forced to read as much as they used to. So I think there are a number of things kind of at play that are responsible for, degenerating effects on the brain, and that, generative AI is certainly a part of that discussion. But I'd be hesitant to say that it is kind of the driving force behind that. If anything, it might be a catalyst. It might be making things worse, but I don't think it's solely responsible at this point.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good perspective. So I want to take this a little more positive. Maybe it's a good time to be a piano teacher. Like maybe piano can be part of the answer. Like we have this creative instrument that we play and uses all the parts of our brain. Talk to me a little bit about why it's a good time to be a piano teacher, if you believe it is. I believe it is.
We live in a world where the arts are needed kind of more than ever in so many ways. Very few things really encourage creativity and thinking and openness and willingness to try new things like the arts. And for us specifically, music. So being a piano teacher right now, first of all, there's never been a more lucrative time for piano teachers if you know how to market yourself or you happen to be in the right area. I see many independent studio teachers making more than just a living, but actually doing quite well for themselves. So in that sense, if you have the business savvy for it, it's a great time to be a piano teacher, especially with the way the internet is now. You don't have to solely teach in your area. You can also teach people from across the world or across the country, and not limit yourself geographically to only teaching students within, your city or your county. So in that regard, there's never been a more proliferous time to be a piano teacher. Compare that to even just 20 years ago. The thought of teaching lessons online, would have been something that nobody would have ever imagined really possible. In the face of, this idea that people are becoming less and less creative, we kind of have this golden opportunity to encourage children and teenagers and adults to be creative. And I think that's actually really inspiring because we are teaching something that, one, they're really not going to get anywhere else. We're teaching something that requires patience and dedication and discipline, which they may not be getting through other domains. And piano, in many ways, one's achievement at the instrument is the purest form of a meritocracy there is, because you only get out of the piano or any other instrument what you put into it. And so we're teaching people about, first of all, the valuable lesson of accountability. If you don't put in the work, you don't get the results. And I think that is an incredibly important lesson that needs to continue to be taught today. So I think more than ever, piano teachers occupy this really interesting intersectional space in society where, yeah, we're teaching the piano, but we're also teaching really valuable elements about being a person and being a responsible human that children just may not be getting in other places. And for adult students, I think it's more important than ever. The number of times that I encounter people that say, oh, well, I used to play the piano and then I stopped. So many of them just want to reconnect and with the instrument and take lessons and, engage with that creative side of themselves again that they simply haven't had the opportunity to because life and work kind of take over. So I think the position of the piano teacher is fairly cemented in society. I don't think we're going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And I think above all else, the independent studio teacher does far more valuable work than, kind of like the academic, piano professor does, because without, community music teachers, first of all, there's nobody to come pursue a degree in music. Piano teachers are fairly safe, I think, and especially since nobody's figured out a way that I'm aware of to make ChatGPT practice for you. So,
well, Omar, this has been such an enlightening conversation. I loved hearing from you and talking with you. If listeners have any questions or want to reach out, where could they find you?
Typically, the easiest way to get in touch with me is to email me at my university email, oroy@email.sc.edu. I'm usually very happy to communicate with people about relevant research topics. But if you ever see me at a state or national or international conference, feel free to track me down and have a conversation. I generally love talking to people about this stuff, so I'll probably end up talking your ear off.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today and giving your time to be with us today. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I had a great time.
I really felt like this could have been a 5-hour conversation. There were so many more questions I would have loved to dive into with Omar, but I really appreciated his balanced approach. He talked about the environmental impact and being conscious about our use of AI, but also acknowledged that it isn't going away and we can use it to do the things that we are already doing more thoroughly and efficiently. If this episode resonated with you or made you think about things you maybe hadn't thought of before in a different way, I would encourage you to share it with a piano teacher friend. Maybe you even have a friend that you've had some of these discussions with about AI who might enjoy hearing the perspective of another piano teacher. It means so much to me that you listen every week, and I am grateful to you for tuning in. That's the end of the show for this week. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I'll talk with you again next week.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.